Why do the most dangerous movements always begin with the weakest leaders? Why do crowds kneel before those who can barely stand on their own? Think about it. History is not built by the powerful, it is haunted by the fragile. By men trembling behind podiums, masking fear with anger, disguising emptiness with grandeur. They rise not because they are strong, but because the world around them is desperate to believe in something, anything that gives meaning to its own confusion. Weak leaders are mirrors for the collective wound. They promise safety, belonging, redemption. Yet behind those promises lies the oldest hunger in the human psyche, the hunger for control. They whisper what the masses secretly crave to hear. You are special. You are chosen. You are right. And in that whisper, entire nations fall asleep. The paradox is this: strength does not create blind obedience, fear does. And fear is born in the hearts of those who never mastered themselves. When a leader's inner chaos meets a crowd's inner void, a dangerous fusion occurs. The leader projects his weakness outward, and the followers absorb it as conviction. That is how monsters are made, not out of power, but out of insecurity disguised as destiny. So ask yourself, when you look at those who lead your world, politicians, influencers, executives, even the people you admire, are they guiding from wisdom or manipulating from fear? Because every time you obey weakness, you help it grow stronger. This video will take you deep into that truth. It will show you why weak leaders give birth to dangerous followers, and how to make sure you never become one of them. Take a breath. Stay until the end. Because what you're about to hear might change the way you see leadership, power, and even yourself. And before we begin, if you find meaning in messages that awaken the mind and shake the soul, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you'll be the first to receive the next video that challenges everything you thought you knew. He didn't scream power, he whispered fear. And somehow the world obeyed. It was the early 1930s. Germany was broken, its economy in ruins, its people humiliated, its identity shattered. The nation that once saw itself as proud and untouchable now wandered in the dark, desperate for someone to tell them who they were again. And in that void, a frail man with sunken eyes and trembling hands stepped forward. Adolf Hitler did not look like a powerful person. His body was weak, his voice cracked under emotion, his movements erratic. But what made him dangerous was not his strength, it was his weakness, weaponized. He did not lead with confidence. He led with wounds. Every word he spoke carried the vibration of pain, the kind of pain that millions secretly shared but never dared to voice. He didn't promise prosperity, he promised revenge. He didn't sell hope, he sold resentment disguised as destiny. He didn't unite people through love, he bound them together through fear. And they followed him. Because when a weak man dares to shout louder than his pain, those who are also in pain hear an echo. They don't see a tyrant, they see a reflection. That is the secret of every dangerous leader. They become a mirror for the collective wound. The crowd doesn't follow the man. They follow the part of themselves that has been ignored, shamed, and abandoned. Jung called this the shadow, the repressed darkness we refuse to face within. And when one man dares to embody that darkness publicly, people mistake it for courage. But what they are really witnessing is possession. Hitler's rise was not a story of power. It was a story of projection. The people projected their anger, their humiliation, their despair onto him, and he gave it back to them in a shape they could worship. A savior molded out of rage. You see, a weak leader doesn't dominate with might. He dominates with emotion. He doesn't have to inspire you, he just has to infect you. And once infected, you don't think. You feel, and when you stop thinking, you become a follower. Look beyond history, and you'll see the same pattern repeating itself in every corner of modern life. Weakness, wearing the mask of power. The CEO who bullies his team because he's terrified of being exposed as inadequate. The spiritual guru who preaches purity while drowning in secret addictions. The influencer who posts daily affirmations to hide how empty she feels inside. They don't lead because they are whole, they lead because they are afraid of their own reflection. And fear, when left unchecked, becomes manipulation. Jim Jones built a community of love that ended in poison. Charles Manson preached freedom and left death behind him. They all shared one thing: fragile egos disguised as divine purpose. They demanded obedience, not because they were sure of themselves, but because they weren't. They needed others to believe so they could keep pretending. And their followers, good people, intelligent people, fell under the spell. Why? Because weakness attracts weakness. The lost seek someone to give them direction, and the fearful seek someone to fear more than themselves. Together, they build illusions that eventually devour them. When you give a broken man power, you don't heal him. You weaponize his pain. And when that pain spreads, it doesn't just destroy him, it consumes everyone who believed in him. History's darkest chapters weren't written by monsters. They were written by frightened men and the frightened millions who mistook fear for truth. So pause for a moment. Ask yourself, who are the leaders you follow today? Do they call you to think for yourself, or do they demand your loyalty? Do they expand your awareness, or do they exploit your emotions? Because the weak leader still walks among us. He wears designer suits, stands behind podiums, and smiles through screens. He tells you what you want to hear while feeding on your attention, your faith, your fear. And as long as we refuse to confront our own darkness, we will keep following his. If you've ever seen this pattern in your own life, at work, in politics, in a relationship, where someone's weakness became your burden, I want to hear your story. Share it in the comments below. Tell me what you've learned, how it changed you, and how you broke free. I read every comment myself, and your words may help someone else wake up from the same illusion. Because sometimes the only way to break the spell of a weak leader is to see the weakness within ourselves first. Every weak leader begins not with ambition, but with fear. Fear of being forgotten, fear of being unseen, fear of confronting the chaos within. And that fear, when left unexamined, metastasizes into the hunger for control. Carl Jung once said, "The leader who doesn't confront his shadow becomes possessed by it." To understand why weak leaders create dangerous followers, we must look beneath the surface of charisma, beneath the speeches and the slogans, into the shadow that governs them. The shadow in Jungian psychology is the part of the psyche we refuse to see. It contains everything we deny: our envy, our rage, our vanity, our craving for dominance. A strong leader learns to face this darkness, to own it, to transmute it into wisdom. But a weak leader, one terrified of what he might find inside, chooses denial. And denial is the perfect breeding ground for corruption. Because what we repress does not disappear. It hides, it festers, and then it emerges wearing the mask of righteousness. A weak leader stands before the world claiming moral superiority, yet inside, he is a prisoner of his own insecurity. He demands obedience not because he is sure of himself, but because his ego depends on constant validation. Every follower becomes a mirror that reflects back the illusion of strength he desperately needs to survive. In this way, weakness feeds on worship, and followers hungry for certainty, aching for belonging, offer exactly that. Jung would call this a collective projection. The followers project their unacknowledged desires, their own fear of insignificance, onto the leader. They make him a god so they can remain children. But the leader, already ruled by his unconscious shadow, absorbs this worship like poison. The more he is idolized, the more detached he becomes from reality. The more detached he becomes, the more he needs control. It is a feedback loop of madness. The leader's weakness calls for worship. The crowd's worship deepens his delusion. Together, they spiral into destruction. Nietzsche warned of this when he said, "He who cannot command himself must obey others." The weak leader is not the master, he is the slave of his own ego. And his followers, though they think they are obeying strength, are actually obeying his fear. This is why totalitarian regimes are built not on discipline, but on panic, not on order, but on obsession. Fear becomes a currency of loyalty. The leader's fear of losing control becomes the follower's fear of thinking for themselves. When you look into the psychology of such leaders, you don't see confidence, you see fragmentation. You see a man split in two, the public persona and the private void. In public, he performs authority. In private, he is devoured by the very demons he denies. It is the same pattern Jung observed in patients who projected their darkness onto others. The more they insisted they were pure, the more their repressed impulses ruled them from the shadows. And the crowd? They too are infected. Because every society that idolizes a weak leader becomes a reflection of his psyche. His paranoia becomes their nationalism. His insecurity becomes their anger. His emotional instability becomes their collective rage. They lose the ability to discern truth from illusion because their identity no longer belongs to them. It belongs to the leader's shadow. And here lies the true danger. Once the crowd merges with the unconscious of a weak man, there are no individuals left, only extensions of his fear. Nietzsche called this herd morality. It is the morality of those who would rather follow than face themselves. It feels safe, righteous, even holy, but it's the slow death of the soul. Because when you surrender your inner compass to another person's weakness, you become complicit in your own manipulation. That's why the most dangerous leaders in history didn't just command armies, they commanded psyches. They ruled from within. They planted their voice inside the minds of others until those minds could no longer tell the difference between obedience and identity. But here's the truth Jung wanted us to remember. Every tyrant first appears inside. Before he rules a nation, he rules your thoughts. Before he enslaves a crowd, he enslaves your fear. And if you don't confront that inner dictator, the part of you that wants to be told what to do, the part that seeks certainty at any cost, you will always find yourself kneeling before someone else's illusion of strength. So pause, look inward, ask yourself, who do you follow? And more importantly, why? Do you follow because you see wisdom or because you fear thinking for yourself? Because the line between freedom and fanaticism is drawn not by governments, but by the human mind. If this resonates with you, if you've ever seen how a leader's fear infected a group or a movement, share your reflection in the comments. Tell me what you witnessed. Tell me what you learned. I read every story because your experience, your truth, might be the mirror that helps someone else finally see theirs. If you think the age of dangerous followers ended with dictators, look around. It's still here, only now it's dressed in designer suits, filtered through screens, and disguised as inspiration. Power has changed its language. The podium became a podcast. The uniform became a brand. And the weak leader no longer shouts from a stage. They whisper through your feed. This is the age of the influencer, where visibility is mistaken for virtue and performance is confused with purpose. In modern America, power is measured not in integrity, but in attention. The one who can command emotion, anger, outrage, devotion becomes king. And just like before, the most dangerous rulers are the weakest ones. They don't lead because they are whole. They lead because they are empty. They speak not from strength, but from fear, the fear of being irrelevant, of fading into the noise. They build followings not to share truth, but to feed a craving that never ends. Look at the culture around you. The influencer who preaches confidence while crumbling inside. The CEO who talks about purpose but rules through fear. The activist who calls for empathy yet thrives on division. They look powerful, but they're all driven by the same wound, the need to be seen, the terror of silence. And that's what makes them dangerous. Because weakness, when disguised as leadership, doesn't heal, it spreads. Carl Jung called this collective possession. The moment when individuals lose their center and merge into a shared illusion. The influencer becomes a symbol. The followers become reflections. Each feeds the other's emptiness until both forget who they are. The crowd worships the image. The leader worships the crowd. And between them, reality disappears. Scroll through social media and you'll see it everywhere, tribes forming around personalities instead of principles. Movements built on outrage instead of understanding. Celebrities turned into prophets, gurus turned into gods. It's not leadership, it's hypnosis, and the terrifying part? Most people don't even realize they're under the spell. They believe they're choosing who to follow. But really, they're seeking someone to validate what they already feel: fear, anger, emptiness. The weak leader promises certainty in a chaotic world. He says, "Follow me and you'll belong." And the lost obey. Not because they believe, but because they can't bear to stand alone. Erich Fromm warned of this decades ago. People seek leaders to escape their own freedom. Freedom is terrifying. It means responsibility. It means silence. It means facing the truth without someone telling you what it should be. And so, we surrender our freedom in exchange for belonging. But belonging built on dependence is not connection, it's captivity. The weak leader doesn't free you. He binds you to his fear. This is the new tribalism, not built on nations or bloodlines, but on hashtags, algorithms, and outrage. You don't have to think. You just have to agree. You don't have to grow. You just have to belong. And every time you trade your independence for identity, you strengthen the weak leader's control. Because he needs your faith to survive. Without followers, his voice disappears. Without attention, he fades back into the silence he's terrified of facing. And yet, the true tragedy I ascend to the weak leader himself. It is that he's a reflection of us. He is born from our fear of emptiness, our addiction to approval, our hunger for meaning in a world that numbs us daily. We create him every time we value popularity over depth, reaction over reflection, noise over truth. The solution isn't to hate these leaders, it's to stop feeding them. To stop giving our energy to those who exploit fear. To stop mistaking noise for guidance. So before you click follow, before you share that post or repeat that outrage, stop for a moment. Ask yourself, am I following this person because they awaken my strength or because they echo my fear? Because the moment you ask that question honestly, the illusion begins to break. You'll see that the weak leader doesn't actually hold power over you. He only reflects the power you've forgotten you already have. And when you reclaim that power, when you stop feeding the weak with your attention, you become something dangerous to the system, a conscious individual. If you've ever followed someone who later revealed their weakness, an influencer, a leader, a friend, share that story in the comments. Tell me what woke you up, what you learned, and how it changed you. I read every single story because awareness grows through conversation. And who knows, your truth might be the light that helps someone else finally see theirs. Because in the end, weak leaders survive only when we stop thinking for ourselves. But the moment one person wakes up, the illusion starts to crumble. And that is how real revolutions begin. Carl Jung once said, "People don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That is where true freedom begins, not when you find the right leader, but when you finally face the parts of yourself you've avoided. Weak leaders only exist because we fear doing that work. We fear silence. We fear solitude. We fear the responsibility that comes with freedom. So instead, we search for anyone who seems confident enough to carry that weight for us. Erich Fromm called this the escape from freedom. He said that most people don't want liberty. They want relief. They don't want to think for themselves. They want someone else to think for them. And that is how a weak leader is born, not out of power, but out of our collective unwillingness to grow up. We follow the loudest voice because it spares us from hearing our own. We surrender our choices to those who promise certainty, even when deep down, we know they're afraid too. Maybe you've felt this before. You admired someone, a mentor, a boss, a partner, who seemed to have all the answers. You trusted them. You believed in them. But slowly, you began to notice something strange. The closer you got, the smaller you felt. Their confidence started to feel like control. Their guidance turned into dependence. And one day, you realized you weren't following them anymore, you were obeying them. That's the moment awakening begins. Weak leaders don't just dominate nations, they dominate minds. They don't demand obedience through force, but through emotional need. They make you feel seen just enough to keep you loyal, guilty enough to keep you quiet, and afraid enough to keep you close. But what happens when you stop needing their approval? Their power evaporates. When you realize that no one can validate you better than your own awareness, something inside you shifts. You stop reacting, you stop begging, you stop explaining yourself. You don't become cruel, you become clear. That's real strength. It's not loud or defiant. It's calm and unshakable. It's the kind of strength that can walk away from manipulation without hatred. Jung believed this was the path to individuation, becoming whole within yourself. It's when you integrate both your light and shadow, your strength and your weakness, instead of outsourcing them to others. You stop worshiping confidence in others and start cultivating it in yourself. Nietzsche called this state the birth of the Bermensch, the higher human, the one who creates values from within. This isn't about ego, it's about responsibility. It's about realizing that no one will save you, no one will complete you, no one will lead you home but you. And yes, it's terrifying at first. The silence feels endless, the uncertainty feels heavy. But that's the price of consciousness facing yourself without distraction. Once you do, something beautiful happens. You no longer crave validation. You no longer seek belonging in the crowd. You start making choices, not out of fear, but out of clarity. That's the kind of freedom no weak leader can take from you. They may still exist, they always will, but their power over you ends the moment you stop handing it to them. Because their influence depends entirely on your attention. When you stop feeding them your energy, your belief, your obedience, they collapse. And what's left is you, whole, awake, capable of leading yourself. So here's the truth. You don't have to overthrow the system. You don't have to destroy anyone. You just have to reclaim yourself. Weakness attracts weakness until one person wakes up. And maybe that person is you. Because real leadership begins when you stop needing followers. And real freedom begins when you stop needing permission to be free. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever realized that you were following someone not out of strength, but out of fear? What helped you break away? What did you discover about yourself once you did? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone because your awakening story might be the light that helps someone else break free from theirs. Real leadership doesn't begin with commanding others, it begins with mastering yourself and weakness. Weakness isn't just a flaw in leaders. It's a mirror reflecting the parts of us that still seek permission to exist. Every time you follow blindly, you give away a piece of that permission. You silence your own voice to keep the peace. You choose comfort over truth. And slowly, almost without noticing, you stop belonging to yourself. That's how weak leaders are born. Not in parliaments or on screens, but in the quiet corners of our own avoidance. Because when we refuse to take responsibility for our inner chaos, someone else will do it for us and call it leadership. Carl Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. Look around. Most people are still ruled by that unconscious force. They think they're choosing their leaders, but they're really choosing their projections, their hopes, their fears, their shadows. But you've seen through it now. You've seen that every weak leader is just a reflection of the weakness we refuse to face within. You've seen that the only true power that lasts is the one built on awareness, not applause. And you've felt it, that quiet, unwavering strength that comes when you no longer need anyone to tell you who you are. That's the moment everything changes. When you stop needing validation, manipulation loses its grip. When you stop seeking saviors, fear stops selling. And when you stop following weakness, strength begins to grow where obedience once lived. So the next time you find yourself drawn to a voice that promises certainty, pause. Ask yourself, does this voice awaken my awareness or my dependence? Does it expand my freedom or feed my fear? Because real leaders don't enslave you with their conviction. They liberate you with their questions. And maybe that's the point of all this. Not to destroy weak leaders, but to outgrow them. To reach a place where no manipulative voice can enter, because you've already met your own. The voice inside you that doesn't scream, doesn't beg, it simply knows. That's the voice the world needs most right now. Not louder voices, not more followers, but individuals who have become whole. Because the moment you stand firm in yourself, something subtle yet profound happens. The system trembles. Weak leaders lose their audience. Manipulators lose their stage. And in the silence that follows, a new kind of strength emerges, one rooted not in control, but in consciousness. That's how revolutions begin, quietly, one awakened mind at a time. So look within. Because the weakest leader you'll ever follow might be the one inside your own mind. And the moment you face that leader with honesty, you free yourself from every illusion of control the world has ever offered. Don't wait for someone stronger to lead you. Become the kind of soul that cannot be led by fear. The kind of mind that cannot be manipulated. The kind of heart that refuses to follow weakness disguised as strength. That is what true leadership looks like. Not a crown, not a title, not an empire, just presence pure, grounded, and awake. And when you live from that place, you don't just change yourself. You change everyone who meets you. Because real power doesn't control, it inspires. So if this message resonated with you, if something deep inside you woke up while listening, then you already know this journey doesn't end here. It begins now. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss the next video that will challenge your mind, stir your soul, and awaken what the world has tried to silence. And before you go, tell me in the comments, what truth hit you the hardest today? What realization do you want to carry into your life after this? I read every word because your reflection might be the spark that awakens someone else. You are not a follower. You are not a victim of weak leaders. You are consciousness itself, remembering its own strength. And that is where real freedom begins.